Thus far in my review of the Green Bone Saga, I have generally panned it. I gave Jade City and Jade War, the first two books in the trilogy, just an average rating of 3 stars each, although I did enjoy Jade War just a little bit more than the first book. Well, now I have finished the series. I just wrapped up reading Jade Legacy, though I did give myself some time to wipe away my tears. I have to say, this book absolutely blew it out of the water. I feel that I got everything that I wanted. I am walking away from the story satisfied with what I got in the end, and this is definitely going to get a higher rating than the first 2 books in the series. So let's get into my review of the third and final book in the Green Bone Saga, Jade Legacy. I should probably hold the book up. Jade Legacy by Fonda Lee. This is a hefty book. It is quite a read as well. It was a lot of reading, but at the same time, I think I got through this book the fastest out of the 3 just because the pacing of this one was a lot stronger. And I'm going to get into that, talk about some of the characters, and also talk about how it managed to address some of the complaints that I had about the previous 2 books, all in this book, and how this definitely increased my enjoyment of the series overall. So let's talk Jade Legacy. I'm going to put this back so I'm not hitting it the entire time. If you remember from my reviews of Jade City and Jade War, I had a major issue with this series, and that was the underusage of Jade and always feeling like we were building up to things that then felt anticlimactic by the time that we got to them and then they were resolved. Things tended to end really quickly once they got exciting, and then we were left with some pretty, honestly, boring parts of the story. And I know that some people really like those aspects of stories, and for me, I enjoy a healthy medium, and I didn't really think that Jade City and Jade War really had a great balance between the slower and more political movements and the more action-packed and climactic moments in the story. Those seem to be very few and far between, and what we were left with in the between moments were very long, drawn-out periods of conversations and dinners and all sorts of things of that nature, which again, that's your cup of tea, that's awesome, and I totally get the appeal, but it just wasn't really for me, and I was beginning to feel like I really wasn't the audience for a story like the Green Bone Saga. This, of course, wasn't completely unexpected because I knew going into this story that it was pretty divisive. There are some people who really love it and some who really hate it or at least pan it, and I really wanted to know what camp I was going to fall into. Of course, I went into this hoping that I was going to fall into the camp that loves it. I don't go into a story hoping that I hate it. That would be really weird. And unfortunately, I just didn't really fall in love with it in these first 2 books. But the third book, wow, it was so well done and addressed so many of these problems for me. It was a lot more aggressive in its pacing. Not necessarily in a sense that it was just constant action. I don't think that would have worked for the story at all, and I think the people who loved the first 2 books would wind up hating the third if that were the case. What I did manage to do was balance the pacing in a manner that was more conducive to the sort of story that I typically enjoy. And what I mean by that is, yeah, there were some slower moments, but I was still engaged in those, and I always felt like the stakes were high, and we constantly got to a point of action that really just swept me up, and things could go on for a while, and even the moments where it was really just political talks felt extremely tense, and you never knew what was going to happen, and I think this was executed absolutely fantastically. I was on the edge of my seat or the edge of my bed, wherever I was reading at the time, throughout the entirety of my experience with this story. It was fantastic. She did such a great job with the pacing and with the story and the rising and falling action. It was a lot more consistent for me, and I definitely enjoyed the experience of reading the story a lot more than I did with the first 2 books. Now, Jade itself has played a significant role throughout the entirety of this trilogy, but just because Jade was so important throughout the story doesn't mean we got to see it used or see the magic system fully explored. So by the time that we got to Jade Legacy, I was really wanting for some real Jade experience, especially some Jade enhanced combat. I was really excited to see some more of that, and I feel like I got exactly what I needed out of Jade Legacy. I got a lot of what was missing, in my opinion, from Jade City and Jade War in this third and final book. And as I mentioned in my last review, pretty sure I mentioned it, Jade Legacy was kind of the last opportunity really to show me what Jade could do and give me some really cool Jade combat scenes, and I think that I got them. This was a really satisfying conclusion, and I'm walking away from the story feeling like I got everything that I could have out of it. I'm not left wanting like I was in the first 2 books. One thing that I have praised consistently throughout the entirety of the Green Bone Saga is the character work, and all of that character work is just, it amounts to so much in this third book. We are finally reaping what has been sown throughout this story. We get to see the full development of these characters in Jade Legacy, and it is so worth it. This story is worth it for the characters. They are some of the best written characters that that I have experienced in a long time, and their arcs are wonderful by the time that you get to see them completed. Once you get to the end of it and you see where everybody ends up and everything is wrapped up, not necessarily in a beautiful tight bow and everything's happy, but everything is wrapped up and you feel like you have an end to the stories of these characters, it's fantastic. She did a wonderful job writing these characters, and I really enjoyed exploring them, and I'm going to miss some of these characters. I really liked getting to know them and experience them on the page. There were some I was always excited to see when a chapter from their perspective would pop up, or when they would pop up in someone else's chapter. It was so well done. I loved these characters. As I mentioned in Jade War, Andon was my favorite then, but for this book, I'm actually kind of torn, interestingly, between Wen and Nico. Those were the two characters that I felt resonated with me the most and that I really wanted to explore further. I felt their personalities really popped off the page, and some of the struggles that they were dealing with and some of the challenges they were facing felt incredibly real and raw. I loved these characters, and I cried a few times reading this book. Yeah, it's about time that I admitted to crying during a book. It's been a while since I cried during a book, and this really got me. And now when I say that I was crying throughout this book, I'm not saying that that she just kept killing off characters. What I am saying is she helped you connect emotionally with these characters and put them in situations that were incredibly emotional. Even in the early chapters in this story, we see things from a particular character's perspective and see how she's feeling not only about the world around her, but about herself and her family, her husband in particular, and that was so just, oh, the anguish. It was so well done. She did a wonderful job writing these characters, and I fell in love with each of them, and I am a bit sad to say goodbye to them. So the character work, I feel, is the strongest aspect of the Green Bone Saga. It was remarkably well done. The last thing that I really want to praise here and kind of get across is that this is a masterful ending to the story. I don't know if you know this, but writing endings is incredibly hard. In fact, I'm willing to bet that if you reflect on some of the stories that you've experienced more endings that you didn't like than endings that you did. There are a lot of endings out there that just aren't all that great. They don't wrap things up the way that they feel they should have. Again, that doesn't mean that everything is wrapped up nicely and it's a happily ever after, but it does mean that things are actually wrapped up. We have some sort of resolution and we don't walk away from the story feeling like we wasted our time. And a lot of stories kind of make me feel that way by the time I get to the end of them. We can have a wonderful story and then it ends in a way that's not all that great. Jade Legacy is not that way at all. It is a masterful ending. Seeing the way the story ends and seeing the direction that it has been taking all along. Honestly, I had no predictions for how this story was going to end. I really didn't know what it was going to be like when it ended. I was starting to feel toward the end of the book that maybe this wasn't really the third and final book. Maybe there's a fourth book that's planned, because I just couldn't see how things could end in a way that was going to leave me feeling satisfied. And then she pulled it off. Fonda pulled off an incredible ending. In fact, the ending was so good that throughout this book, I was pretty set on what the star rating was going to be for it. But in the last 3 chapters, I raised my star rating because that's how good the final couple of chapters in this book are. It was incredibly well done. I could not have asked for or imagined a better ending for the Green Bone Saga. I loved this ending. It was so impactful. She did a fantastic job with it, and the character work just shown from beginning all the way through to the final page in this story. It is definitely a story that I'm a little sad to have closed the final page on. Not necessarily because I loved the first 2 books, because I'm still sticking by my ratings of those first 2, but this story was so incredibly well written and these characters were so wonderful and just came right off of the page that, yeah, I'm a little bit sad that it's over now. But I'm also glad that I get to move on to another story. But before I move on to the next story I'll be reading, I need to give you my overall rating for the Green Bone Saga's final book, Jade Legacy. As we dive into this overall rating, I just wanted to remind you that you can like, comment, and subscribe, all at absolutely no cost to you other than whatever your internet charges you. Who would have thought? All of those things really help me out as I try to grow this channel, so I hope you will consider doing that. And now onto my final rating for Jade Legacy. I was pretty set on 4 stars for Jade Legacy. I felt 3 stars in the very early pages. I thought, okay, this is gonna be another pretty average experience for me. But then honestly, within the first 4 or 5 chapters, I knew this was gonna be pretty different and things were going to be way more intense. The stakes were going to feel a lot higher and it was going to be at a breakneck pace from beginning to end, and I wasn't really wrong about that. Yeah, we took some time to slow down, but the story really meshed a lot better with me than the first 2 books did. So I was feeling 4 stars, and I continued to feel like it was going to be about a 4-star read up until the very end of the book. The last 2 or 3 chapters of this book absolutely blew me away, threw my expectations out the window. It was so incredibly well done. What a powerful ending, and honestly cinematic. What a cinematic ending this was. I absolutely loved every moment of it. Fonda Lee did such a incredible job with the end of the story, and that is why Jade Legacy is getting 5 stars from me. The characters were excellent, the pacing was fantastic, the world was fully explored and thought out. The usage of Jade was far more present in this story, and the ending of this epic trilogy was, I couldn't have done anything better myself. I couldn't have asked for anything better. There was nothing that I felt wasn't wrapped up the way that it needed to be. I have no complaints, honestly. This was a 5-star read for me. Jade Legacy was wonderful. So 5 stars to Jade Legacy, my first 5-star book of 2022. I hope that there will be many more. And in fact, I'm moving on to John Gwynn's The Faithful and the Fallen series. Pull Malice off the shelf. So I will be starting up on this shortly after I am done filming this review. I'm really looking forward to this series. I'm also really looking forward to Shadow of the Gods, but I'm gonna read that after I finish The Faithful and the Fallen. So thank you so much for taking the time to check out this review of Jade Legacy. If you wanna make sure that you see my next review, which will be for this book, pop up in your feed next week, make sure that you subscribe. And if you wanna watch another video from me in the meantime, you can do so by clicking up here. And until next time, bye.